Hello crafters, welcome to Two Hearts Crochet. Today I'm going to show you how I am working the squares or panels as they are for the Star Wars cowl that's happening now on the blog. Everything I've done in the past has been corner to corner for both the Doctor Who and the Harry Potter blankets. This time around I wanted something different, so what I'm doing is a stitch I'm calling straight half double crochet. Basically meaning I'm just doing half double crochet in a straight line back and forth. I'm going to show you how I'm reading the graphs as I've designed them using a sample graph here that I've designed and will make available to you. You can disregard the arrows on the graphs if you're going to do the straight half double crochet like me. I mostly put them on there for people who are doing corner to corner. I know that they're really helpful for me, so I thought I'd leave them on there for those who want them. For half double crochet, it's really simple. You have your graph here, and all you're going to end up doing is you're going to start your chains, which aren't on the graph here, but you're going to do your chains, and then you're just going to crochet back and forth across in half double crochet. Really simple. You can see I changed the arrows on this graph to represent more of what we're going to be doing for the straight half double crochet. On the corner to corner, you can just disregard them. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. One thing to note is when I'm doing my straight half double crochet for the Star Wars cowl, I am basically doubling up on my stitches and my rows. And what I mean by that is if I were to use my hook and my yarn and do one half double crochet per block on the graph, what would end up happening is my square or my panel that I make would end up being kind of small. I'd have to use a really big hook to make it the size that I want. So instead of doing that, or instead of making the graphs huge, and having, like 150 or something blocks, it'd be kind of hard to put on a single piece of paper, which is what I try to do. So instead of doing that, what I'm doing instead is doubling up on them. So I'm going to do 2 half double crochets per block, and then I'm going to come back and do the row again a second time. So you're basically doing 2 half double crochets per block, 1 and 2, and then you do that all the way across. And then when you get to the end here, you're just going to turn your work, chain, and work the same stitches back this way. So we'll go ahead and start here. What I have is some yarn that doesn't really match the colors on the graph, but is really easy to see. We're going to start with the blue yarn here. You can see that our graph is a 9 by 9 graph. Since we're going to double it, it's going to essentially become 18 by 18. And with my half double crochets, I like to chain 2 and have 2 chains for my turning chain. Some people like a little bit less, some people like a little bit more. So whatever works for you, keep that in mind when you do your chains. In this case, thinking of it as doing 18 by 18, we're going to start by chaining 18 and then chaining 2 more for our turning chain for a total of 20. So we'll go ahead and start that, and we'll get going. So we'll just chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And so there is our chain here. This is not represented, the chains aren't represented on the graphs. In the written instructions that I'm providing for the Star Wars cowl, I will state how many chains to make, assuming you do two chains for your turning chain. And I do break that down on the graphs for you. So if you're going to do 1 half double crochet per block and only do the rows once, then you can do it that way. This is just for doubling. So we have our 20 chains here, so we're going to go ahead and start in the 3rd chain space from the hook, skip those turning chains there, and half double crochet. And there's our first half double crochet. And keeping in mind what we're doing is doubling up 2 stitches per block. You can see this entire first row here is all gray or blue in our case. So we're just going to have 18 half double crochet stitches across. So we've already got one, so we'll just keep going across the row here. Let's see here. I have a pen over here. Keep that. We'll use that in a second here. What we're going to end up doing is after we get these half double crochets done, we're going to turn and do the row a second time. And I'll show you how I keep track of this as I go along, just as a tip for you guys. I apologize for my slow crocheting. Let's see, in case you're wondering, this is just a worsted weight yarn that I have here. I think it's Red Heart Super Saver, I think, that I bought like 4 years ago. I don't know. The hook is a size I9, 5.5 millimeter hook. Usually my go-to hook. I wanted something a little bit smaller for the Star Wars cow, just so that my blanket wasn't so big. It was kind of hard to find a good balance of hook sizes versus stitches to make a good size blanket. So I went with the size 7 hook, which is 4.5 millimeters. It's in between the G6 and the H8, I think is what it's called. But it's a good size hook in case that's something you want to do. Here we have our first row, and it's 18 stitches across. And so what we're going to do now is, now that we've completed the very first row, in order to keep track of what you're doing on the graph, I'd recommend finding some way to mark the graph so that you know in your head you've already done that row one time. That way you don't get confused later on which way you're going. You don't miss any rows that way. It's really helpful. What I like to do is I like to take my pen or my marker and come to the graph here. And on the first row, I usually just, in one block, maybe one on each end of the graph, I just make a dot. That way I don't have to do it for every block on the graph, but I can take a look at either end of this first row at a glance and see that I've already done something there. So that's what you can do. A lot of other people can do, you can do this too if you like. I've heard of other people doing this. Since you're doing each row twice and you're doing 2 stitches per block, you can just draw a little cross there in the block, dividing your block up into 4, which is essentially what we're doing. And that way you can just mark them off as you go. Whatever works for you, like I said. I like to keep things simple and have as few interruptions as possible, which is why I'm just doing the dots as I go. So what we're going to do now, we've reached the end of the first row, the first time of the first row. And so we're going to turn our work here, and we're going to chain 2 more. And we're going to give that first row a second pass. Again, so the row is all blue across the whole first row. So we're just going to keep going in the blue. No color changes, nice and easy. Just 18 half double crochets across in that same color. And I apologize if this video is a little bit long. I just kind of wanted to give you guys an overview as to everything, how I'm doing everything with these. And we'll get to color changes in the next row here, which will be good. If you haven't already, the video I have up on the blog and on the YouTube channel is about color changes for corner to corner is applicable here as well. It's just that the stitch is different. Basically, all I'm doing is doing my color changes before I finish the previous stitch. And I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. But if you need some video advice about color changes in depth and maybe even about bobbins, then you can go ahead and look at those videos and they'll be able to give you a little bit of guidance at least. Okay, so we just finished the second pass of row 1. It's 18 stitches across in the blue, nice and easy. And to mark on the graph that my whole row is done, I usually use a marker, but the pen works too. And I just cross out the whole first row. There you go. Row 1 is done. And we can move on to row 2. And you can see in row 2, we're going to start, these arrows don't mean anything. You can ignore them. Row 2 is going to start with one whole block, meaning 2 stitches of the blue, and then move on to 3 blocks or 6 stitches of the yellow color. And then it just kind of repeats that pattern across. We'll go ahead and try that here. We've got where we left off. We're going to go ahead and chain 2. There's 1 and 2. And then this first block, like I said, is really 2 stitches since we're doubling them. 2 stitches of the blue. So we'll do 1. Oops. And then in the next one, we'll yarn over, pull up. And then before we finish this stitch is where we're going to start the color change. Let's go ahead and take our yellow yarn here and pull that through just like that. If you missed that, we'll go ahead and do that again. There's our first half double crochet. Yarn over, pull up 1 loop, take your yellow yarn, put that on the hook, and pull that through to finish the stitch. You can see we have 1 and then 2 half double crochets blue. And so that finishes up this mark here. And so now we move on to yellow. So we got 2, 4, and 6 in yellow. So we just yarn over and do 1 half double crochet, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 6th one, since it's our last one of that color change, we are going to not finish that stitch. We're going to need more blue yarn. I don't know if you can tell, I'm working from big old balls of yarn over here. Just my skein over here. So instead of doing bobbins like I would normally do, or making smaller balls of yarn, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to pull some yarn out and trim it. And we'll have a new working end of our yarn here. And so then we just complete the color change by putting that on there and pulling it through. Now you can see we've got 6 yellow ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we get 2 more of the blue, so we'll just do 1 and 2. And we're not going to finish that stitch because we're going to do a color change. So we're going to pull out more yellow yarn here. We're going to need a fair bit. If you do this enough, you can kind of guesstimate how much yarn you'll need for a certain color change, and you can try and pull that out. I usually overestimate, which means I end up having lots of ends to trim, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and pull in a new yellow here, and we'll start these 6 stitches, 6 half double crochets. We'll just do 1. Oops, I lied. That's not 1. That's finishing up that color change there. So now we'll do 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, oops, and here's 6. You can see we've got 1 and 2 half double crochets left, which are going to be in blue. We'll pull out some more blue yarn here. Oops. And start our next color change. There we go. And we'll do our last 2 stitches of this row. There's 1 blue and our 2nd blue. And there's that for you. Now what we're going to do is we've done our first pass of row 2. So we're going to go ahead and mark that on the graph with a couple of dots. There's 1 and there's 2. Now we have to go do our second pass on this row, which is really, really easy. The easiest way I can think of for you to think of this is basically whatever you did on the first row, you're going to carry up, whatever you did on the first pass of a row, you're going to carry up to the second pass of the row. So our second pass of this row is going to look exactly the same as this row does. It's going to be really simple. You're not going to have yarn moving around. You're not going to have any color changes pop out of nowhere. It's going to be really simple. All we have to do is turn our work. Don't mind the yarn tails. you can see this can be kind of messy work. And then we're going to go ahead and chain 2 and start the second pass of this row. And so when we're coming back on the row, basically we're coming back from the left hand side here. We'll notice that this is our first block. We're going to go ahead and do 2 half double crochets in the blue, 2, 4, 6 in the yellow, 2 in the blue, 2, 4, 6 in the yellow, and 2 in the blue. Really simple. This graph is very symmetrical, so it makes it a little bit easier. If you're new to this kind of thing or new to color changes, this might be a really good place to kind of test the waters a little bit. Go ahead and continue. So now, like I said, we're just going to do exactly what we did the row before. It's just kind of mirror image from what we did before. So you can see we have these 2 stitches here in blue. So we know right off the top, without even having to look at the graph, we're doing 1 and 2 stitches in the blue. So we'll go ahead and do that. There's 1. And there's 2. We're going to leave that unfinished because now we're going to carry our yarn up. And to do that, you're just going to take your yellow yarn from down below. It's going to look kind of weird at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's going to come real natural to you. One thing I can recommend is to pull after every color change you do for a while, just till you get used to it. Pull your yarn tails tight, your working ends of your yarn, before and after the color change. And that'll help minimize the weird looking lumps or dots you might be getting. It's just kind of a practice thing. So now we can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 there of the yellow. So we know we're doing 6 yellows. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to leave the 6th one incomplete so that we can do our color change back to the blue. And we can see by looking at it, we've got 2 blue stitches here. So we're going to take our blue yarn from down here, pull it a little bit tight, pull the yellow a little bit tight, and pull that through the yellow. And then do your 2 blue stitches. There's 1, and there's the second one. And we can pull on all the yarn tails around here, tighten that up a little bit. And we have our yellow down here. I'm just going to pull that up through the blues, and then we've got 6 more yellows. So we'll go ahead and do 6 yellow half double crochets. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's the 6th one. And we're on our last color change of the second pass of this row, which is back to blue. So we'll pick up our blue from down below, wrap that around, and pull it through. And then we've got 2 blue stitches left, so we just do our 2 blue stitches. There's 1, and whoops, there is 2. And we can turn our work back, and you can see there's the start of our square there. Now that we've finished this row, we can go ahead and cross this off. Cross that off there, and we know we're done with row 2. Row 3 is a little bit different, as you can see. We got some not really decreases, but the color change moves a little bit on the inside and the outside between these 2 colors here and these 2 colors here. And so I'll show you how I handle that with carrying the colors upwards. Basically, we're back to where we started. We're just gonna chain 2 and start on row 3 here with 2, 4 blues, and then 2 yellows, 2, 4, 6 blues, 2 yellows, and 2, 4 blues. So go ahead and just do, whoops, there's 1, 2, you can finish that second one, and then you'll notice since we're doing 4 blue stitches and our yellow yarn is down here, you have a couple of options. You can either cut this and bring in a new yellow when you need it, or you can do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to wrap it around my hook. Well, not yet. What I'm going to do is carry it up and over. That way I don't have to keep bringing in new yarn, and I don't have to keep cutting it, and I don't end up with so many tails. And to do that, all I'm going to do is I'm going to yarn over like I'm going to start my third blue stitch. And to make sure my yellow yarn's in the right spot, I'm going to place it over the hook here and kind of pull tight on that a little bit, just like that. And then I'm going to insert my hook into the yellow stitch, the first yellow stitch of the previous row. You can see I've got the yellows kind of laying on top here. I'm going to pick this blue up that we're working with, and I'm going to pull it through over the yellow. Don't know if you saw that. Try that again. Pull the blue over just like that. And then we're going to just yarn over and pull through again. It's kind of like you're crocheting over the ends if you've ever done that before, except this is just a working end of our yarn. And you can see the color blends seamlessly in here. You can't tell that we even did that. Once you get the whole blanket, you'll never even notice. And so we got 3 stitches here. We need a 4th one. So we're just going to crochet over the yellow again. And since that's the last stitch of that color change, we're going to make the color change now with the yellow. And there you go. Then we've got 2 color changes, or I'm sorry, 2 half double crochets with the yellow. There's 1. And there's 2, but we're not going to finish number 2 because you can see this blue on the graph here juts up and to the right. So in this case, the working end of our blue yarn over here for our next color change is going to come up and over a little bit. And to do that, what I'm going to do is keep my hook just about as level as I can. And I'm going to wrap my blue yarn around my hook, just like that. And I'm going to very gently pull that through those loops there so that the working end of my yarn is still moving, but that it's not so tight that the whole thing puckers. And then that completes the color change for the stitches here. And then what we're going to do is work 6 blue half double crochets in the next 6 stitches here. And so you can see we've got the next stitch is right here. The next stitch after that is kind of hiding behind the blue yarn. And then we got 2 in the blue, and then so on. And so all we're going to do is just yarn over and insert underneath that working blue yarn here. And pull through. And do the same thing. Go underneath the blue that's right there into the stitch of the yellow there. Yarn over and pull that through all the loops there. Now you can see if we tighten up our ends here, it looks a little bit tighter. You can see how the color changes kind of go in like that. And that's what you want. We got the 2 here. I'm going to go ahead and finish this row out. We need 4 more. So there's another one. There's 2. And then you can see again, here's our working yellow down here. We need to move this over 2 stitches. Carry it up and over 2. So we're going to go ahead and yarn over with the blue. Put the yellow on top of that. And insert our hook into the next yellow stitch. You can use your thumb to hold the yellow out of the way if you want. Pull your blue through. And again. And you can pull on that to tighten if you need to. And then yarn over and pull through. And then that's our 6 blue stitches here for the middle of the square. And then we need to do a color change back to yellow. And so we'll just take the yellow that we just moved up and over, yarn over, and pull that through all those blue loops. And then we're going to do 2 yellows. There's 1. There's the second one. And we're going to pick up this blue from over here, and we're going to move it up into the right 2 stitches. So just very gently pull that over, yarn over, insert through the yellow stitch, pull up and pull through, yarn over, and then again underneath this working yarn right here into the yellow stitch right here. Pull up the blue and pull through. Just like that. And then do 2 more blue stitches. There's 1 and there's 2. And that is the first pass at the 3rd row. What we're going to do now is we're going to mark that off on our graph before we forget, because I do that a lot. If it helps, you can always put a stitch marker on one side. I do that a lot, especially as I get started with the graph. Sometimes it's hard to keep track until you get further along. I like to put a stitch marker usually on the left-hand side, and then when I do, I make a mark on the graph corresponding to where I put these stitch markers, so I can look at the graph later and be like, oh, that's where I put it. So yeah, tighten up your yarn tails, and then what we're going to do is the second pass at this row. So we're just going to chain 2 and turn our work. And then, like I said before, basically do exactly what you did for the previous rows. Really simple. You can look at it without even looking at the graph. You can see what you're going to do. You can see here we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 blue stitches. So we're going to do 4 blue stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to pull up our yellow. We can see we have 1, 2 yellow stitches from the previous row. So we just do 1 and 2 yellows, just like that. In the middle here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blue stitches. So just pull up our blue and do 6 blue stitches. And then we have, there's that for you. We have 2 more yellow stitches here. So just pull up our yellow and do 2 yellow stitches. There's, oops. Hold on. Blue yarn, it's not behaving. Try that again. There's 1 yellow, there we go, and our second yellow, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 blue stitches left. So we just pull up the blue and do 1, 2, 3, and 4 blue stitches. And you can tighten up your ends on the other side if you want, if you think you need that. And then there you go. That's the first couple rounds. That's the first 3 rows actually of this whole graph. There we go. And there you have it. Pretty simple. You'll see as you move up the graph. Right now we have 5 color changes. We have here's 2, here's 2 more, and here's the other blue one. And then tails are on the other side. You basically do that exact same thing. Follow the graph for the first pass of the row. You're going to follow the graph as you go from the right side to the left side. And then mark that off so that you know. You can either do an X, you can do a dot, you can put a little check mark next to the row number, whatever works for you. And then when you do your second pass, you're going to do from the right side of the graph to the left. Or if you don't want to look at the graph on the second time around, just pay attention to what you did on the previous row. It's going to be exactly the same. Just pull all of your yarn up one whole level. Hopefully that helps make some sense of the color changes. The written instructions, this graph doesn't have any at the moment. I will type some up and include it with it, just so you can see what I'm talking about. But what's going to happen is with the Star Wars Cal, in order to save paper, I have condensed the written instructions so that you can follow them easily, as if you were doing straight half double crochet and doubling up on everything, but so that it doesn't take up a whole lot of space. And what I mean by that is the written instructions are going to say, okay, row 1 has, in this case, 18 blue stitches. Okay. Row 2 means row 2 of the blocks of the graphs, not your second pass of row 1. So when you're looking at it, row 1 is going to say 18 blue. right? That's going to be 18 stitches. Row 2, in this case, is going to say 1 blue. I lied. It's going to say 2 blue, and then 2, 4, 6 yellow, 2 blue, 2, 4, 6 yellow, and 2 blue. There you go. And so what you're going to do is your first pass at row 1, you're going to say, okay, that's 18. Nice and easy. One color change, nice and easy. 18 blue this way and 18 blue that way. And then row 2, you're going to say, okay, we've got 2 blue, 6 yellow, 2 blue, 6 yellow, 2 blue. And that's your first pass, going this way. Your second pass is going to follow from left to right on the graph, but it's going to be, you're going to read the written directions from right to left. So you're going to do this way instead of this way. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to try and provide a little bit clearer instructions on the written instructions pages of the PDFs for the future squares so that there's no confusion there. Anyways, that's all for today. Our next square isn't really a square. I keep calling them squares. Our next panel is the lightsaber panels. It's kind of a 2-for-1 kind of deal. And those will be released on Friday, hopefully first thing in the morning. I will be on the road, so we'll see how that goes with posting those. But they'll be available sometime Friday morning, and you can download those from the blog when they are available. Anyways, in the meantime, happy crafting, and have a good day. Thanks.